Yeah, okay.
Oh, and real quick, I had a Wheel of Time dream last night, or Wheel of Time.
Really?
In the dream, though, they weren't coming out with a show; they were coming out with a movie.
Uh-huh.
And I was at some kind of store in the mall trying to repair their video system or replace a video
Mm-hmm.
system. It was some old, things weren't done right. I was fighting with it, and there at the entrance, there were some of these kids talking about the movie, and they were just so blown away. It's like they couldn't even use words. Like, oh my gosh, the wheel of time, and others would just collapse almost. Just they were so just overcome with how magnificent and awesome the movie was. And finally, I get through the system and I start heading to the theater part of the mall, and there's a big line of people. I mean, like you remember when we saw the Star Wars at the
Yeah,
uh,
that's exactly what
Space
I
Center?
pictured.
Yeah, it was like this huge line of people, except it's moving very fast, but this huge line of people. I see my sister is one of those. She's going through, and I go up there and I get at the tail end of the line and get through walking through the doors of the theater, and that's when I wake up. But
Still left up to the imagination.
yes,
Dang.
yes. Oh, and one of the kids was trying to talk to me about it. Somebody that supposedly knew me. At another point, he's like, "Oh, the one power." He's just quivering with it. Just he couldn't even get out a sentence. He'd just say something, and I was so filled with anticipation. I hope it is that good that it leaves people speechless and breathless.
It will some of us for sure.
Oh
I
yeah,
have no doubt of that.
yeah. I'm sure there'll
Now,
be frustration as
randos who
well.
would just go see, who would be, I don't know, in our area in a mall, maybe
Yeah.
not, but Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wheel of Mind, the Wheel of Time point of view reread podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4, where we have been reading Nynaeve Almira's point of view. I'm your co host, Lajara Dane of the White Jaw.
Hi, I'm Giskel Cimaris, a scholar from Ilion. For any new listeners to our series, I want to remind you that The Wheel of Mind is an in depth character reread podcast, and we may drop spoilers at random times. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee we will. And this right now is your only spoiler warning. Today, we're examining The Dragon Reborn, chapters 29 and 51.
And I'll get us started with my summary of Chapter 29, A Trap to Spring, which opens with Nynaeve, Egwene, and Elaine working in the kitchens as a penance for running away from the White Tower in the previous book. Sue and Sanche had been using their extra duties as a cover for a couple of different issues. One, to distract from questions about Leandrin and other Black Aja sisters, and two, to obscure her secret meetings with an agenda for them. The Amerlin had decided to use them in the fight against the Black Aja. The scene begins with Nynaeve turning roasting meat on a spit while the other two accepted have other kitchen duties, all under the watchful eyes of Lairs, mistress of the kitchens. As Lairs comes to inspect the roast and give judgmental looks to the women, Nynaeve glared right back at her, as she had discovered that smiles just got her no extra kindness from the woman anyway. She refused to be cowed by the chief cook, that horrible woman. After Lara stalked off, Elaine started to threaten and complain about being hit by her. If she hits me just one more time, I'll call Gareth Bryn and just as Egwene was trying to quiet Elaine, the Amerlin came bursting in without her keeper Liane this time. Nynaeve felt relieved, thinking Siwan had finally arrived to meet with her and Egwene, but the Amerlin ignored Nynaeve's attempt at eye contact and heavily scrutinized every aspect of everyone's kitchen work. Laris melted into obsequious smiles, which Swan also seemed to ignore as she pretended to find filth on clean counters. Nynaeve felt disdain for all the serving women who doubled their working speed just from those looks. The fact that she herself had sped up turning the spit was inconsequential to this judgment. She had to look the part of the cowed accepted after all. Suddenly, Swan stopped her survey, staring straight at Elaine, accusing the daughter heir of swearing. But Elaine hadn't been saying anything, Egwene protested. At Swan's suggestion, Laris dragged the two girls away while Swan stayed close to Nynaeve, keeping her head on a swivel to watch the rest of the kitchen while they covertly spoke. It had to be this way to avoid suspicion. There was supposed to be a different cover scenario to bring them into the Amerlin study for more punishment later, but this news could not wait. Shiriam had found a gray man, or rather a woman, dead in her bed. Nynaeve immediately jumped to suspicion of the Mistress of Novices herself, as well as Alana and Elida, who had been acting strangely towards them lately. Swan seemed unconvinced, but dismissively responded that she could keep an eye on Shiriam, and Arafelans like Alana had strange notions of honor. And that brought Nynaeve to her latest piece of news. She thanked the Armelin for the message from Else Grinwell that led her and Egwene to the abandoned Black Aja belongings with clues about Tyr. She left out a few of the details, like Elaine's involvement and the Teleron Riad Terangrial from Varen. She couldn't trust any Aes Sedai too far, especially one who wore the stole. But what Swan said next chilled her. All of the Black Aja members' belongings had been burned. Nobody wanted any of their stuff left behind. And Else Grinwell was sent home 10 days ago. That couldn't have been her they talked to. This is an obvious Black Aja trap, one that Nynaeve said she intended to spring and wait for them. Swan didn't argue. She would provide gold for the journey and asked whether Elaine would be accompanying them, revealing that she knew of the daughter heir's involvement all along, to Nynaeve's frustration. The Armelin thought it would give her plausible deniability to Morgaze if she went asking if the queen went asking about what the Armelin had done with her daughter. If it wasn't Swan's choice after all, then she could easily say she had nothing to do with it. And she wasn't about to say no to another hound for the Black Aja anyway. She would take all she could get. But their time was growing short. Anything else? Nynaeve asked, "What's Kalendor, mother?" The Amerlin seemed caught off guard and went on a bit of a rant as much to herself as to Nynaeve. It's something they must not be allowed to have, a Sa'angreal, one of the most powerful ever created. And when Nynaeve expressed skepticism, how could anybody but the Dragon Reborn take Kalendor? Swan reminded Nynaeve that the Black Aja had stolen Angreal and Terangreal right from under their noses in the White Tower, so why not from the High Lords of Tyr? When Nynaeve muttered under her breath about how horrid Lairs had been, Swan ended their interaction by sarcastically mocking her judge of character. Lairs had been the one to demand that Shiriam give them lighter work and said she would not stand by for anyone breaking the women's health or spirits. As Lairs returned with Egwene and Elaine, Swan praised the chief cook and said she might just make her title, Mistress of the Kitchens, an official one. Lairs beamed with pride, but went right back to her usual scrutiny of her workers as the Amerlin left. Nynaeve turned the meat on a spit, forcing herself to smile at the woman. Egwene and Elaine were both eager to hear they won't have to work in the kitchens like this much longer. They're going to be leaving as soon as the washing up is done. And thus ends chapter 29, A Trap to Spring.
Ah, and you quoted this. I loved it because I feel like it sums up their times in the kitchens when Elaine, says, if that woman strikes me but once more, I shall have Gareth Bryn arrest her. And, you
Yeah.
know, uh, with Elaine, that's probably not an idle threat in the fact that she would ask,
Yeah.
she might write a letter asking Gareth to do that, but I'm not so sure Gareth Bryn would come waltzing into the tower and
Oh
arrest
no.
anybody, even though that's in that
Mm-mm.
is in Andor and it's kind of sort of under their purview. No, no, I think he has more sense than that, or he would not have been able to become the great general that he is. So anyway, yeah, one of those things though that kind of sums up their time there, and I like the that irony of uh, Nynaeve being so frustrated at everyone else. They keep giving in to Laris, and then oh look, see all these women jump when the Amerlin comes in and just stares at them, doesn't even say anything. And they'd all jump and run, and she notices then that she's turning the spit faster. She's
Yeah.
trying to do a better job.
More of her hypocrisy as
Yes,
usual.
yes, I love that. So it's just funny to see, she's thinking one thing and her body's automatically doing another. She's just couldn't stop herself from it, and then had to try to justify it. Well, I've got to look like I'm cowed. Um, so Nadia is one of these people. She is not easily cowed. I mean, in prior episode, she stood basically to nose with Lan, met him
Yeah.
stare for stare, and very few people can do that because Lan has a very fierce stare. He doesn't need to raise his voice. Uh, so I like that she's not easily cowed by people, but everybody is intimidated by somebody. And
Yeah.
So even the Amerlin can get to Nynaeve, though Laris doesn't seem to be able to. All right, so I got to ask your opinion about the gray man that was found in Sheriam's rooms. Of course, we've already had an encounter with a gray man prior, and Sheriam said she found him dead later, you know. So now there's news that another one turns up. And again, this happens off camera. We don't see it happening, but we just get this secondhand information from the Amerlin. This is the first time I recall a gray man not being a man, you know, being female.
Mhm. Yeah, the
Although,
only time I think that
yeah,
I can remember.
that the only one that comes to mind. And this one was dead without a mark on them. Now, I had not tied this together until we were going through our Matt episode. And in fact, I think it was in this book when he was trying to escape from Tarvalin that he faced his first gray man. And basically, if they fail at their mission, they die with a dagger in their heart. It
Mhm.
doesn't really matter how you kill them, their dagger is going to wind up in their heart. You fall off a
Yeah.
bridge with them under you, their dagger winds up in their heart. Rand beheads one of them in the string of merchants that come at
Mhm.
him in this book, and that he thinks are dark friends. We never really have that verified, but one of them's no, I think he didn't behead that one, but he goes through, he kills all these people, and I think he killed 8, but he found 9 bodies. One had a dagger in its heart.
Mhm.
And until you pointed that out, I was completely oblivious to just how many times we have a gray man in the story because unless it's specifically said, I didn't really keep track of it. But every time they fail, they wind up with a dagger in their heart. Well, this one supposedly is laying on Sheriam's bed, dead, without a scratch on her. So I really have my doubts as to this being a gray man unless there's something that some way of delving or something that the Aes Sedai can do to prove, oh yes, this was a gray man. They just died today, but the spirit's been gone from their body for 2 months or whatever. Unless there's
Mhm.
something like that, I really think Sheriam may have been up to her Black Aja tricks. Maybe this was an informant that she felt like she needed to get rid of, or someone
Yeah.
she had tortured for information or killed for some other reason. And her cover story is, lay the body out and then come in and act all shocked, screaming, surprised that there's a gray man in here. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but my first 2 times through the book, of course, the series rather, my first time through it, I did not know Sheriam was Black Aja until we get to that big reveal. When Varian had left the list of those whom she knew. And the second time through, I kind of wanted to forget about it until I got to that point in the story. It was hard to keep that in my mind, hard to remind myself that Sheriam was not one of the good guys.
Mm.
And it's been so recent since I went through the second reread. Going through this now, I suspect everything she says and does. I mean,
Yeah.
from the moment Sheriam meets Egwene and Nynaeve on the docks there at Tarvalon in the Great Hunt, I suspect every word out of her mouth.
Well, you're
So
not alone. Nynaeve is the only person who does in story though. And
yes, you're
that's
right.
that's what I noticed in this chapter. It's not the first time she brings that up. When they encounter that gray man and the person with the crossbow and
Right.
whatever else exactly happened there earlier. Now we didn't read this for our podcast, but I just seem to remember that Nynaeve was the one questioning why Shiriam came across the gray man and why she didn't seem surprised and she didn't say anything about the crossbow. It was just there was something left out of what Shiriam said that made Nynaeve suspicious, and she repeats that suspicion to Swan, who brushes it off. But
Right.
Nynaeve is the only person who ever suspects her, and it's we just kind of seem to learn that it's just Nynaeve being suspicious of all Aes Sedai. That
Yes.
she's right more in a broken clock kind of way. But I
Well,
think she's right. I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think she actually was onto something with some intuition here. But I think that the narrative almost leads you to believe that over so many books because it's so long
right.
before you find out that Shiriam is Black Aja, and you don't have any way where Nynaeve learns about this and that learns that she was vindicated in her suspicion.
Mhm.
So that never really gets resolved. So I think you can easily kind of lose that plot thread and Swan does almost immediately. I'm sure she didn't have anybody actually put any eyes on Sheriam after that, or else she might have noticed something suspicious.
Yeah. So just one of those things that, yeah, I did notice that, like you said, Nynaeve's suspicion of these women. The other two that she mentioned in this was Alana and Elida. Now,
Yep.
Elida, so many people who go through the series are convinced that she's Black Aja when she is not.
Hmm.
She is just inept and bitter and hateful. And none of those really make you, a servant of the Dark One. They may make you a bad person or a bad leader, but not a servant of the Dark One. Um, and the other person she named Alana is not a bad Aes Sedai, but she's like many Greens, I think a little bit hot tempered and probably a little too quick to act compared to how Aes Sedai should be. And we saw that in how she bonded Rand without telling him or without warning him or anything. She just does it,
Hmm.
thinking she can control him somewhat. So she was doing what she thought was best at the time, what she thought was best for the tower, and what she thought was best for the world. But it was a terrible move. So you know you can say, well, Alana is guilty of having poor judgment, and she pays for that. Of course, Nynaeve at the end struggles to save her life, but Alana, she pays dearly for that, um, and does really throughout the rest of the series. Especially in A Memory of Light there at the last battle. So, but you see Nynaeve, I guess, as being somewhat a good judge of character, even though the Amerlin makes fun of her for her poor judgments on Laris. She
Hmm.
still, I think she is a pretty decent judge of character, or whether or not I can trust this person or that person. And the Aes Sedai that she named here, really including the Amerlin, are
Hmm.
not always the people you can trust with everything.
Right.
Because
Her intuition is spot on. I mean, I think it
right,
is a blanket suspicion of pretty much
yeah,
everyone, but
yeah,
I think that's warranted also. She is
uh,
in a dangerous place.
yeah,
And yeah, I think in some ways, yeah, her suspicion of some people might be, again, like a broken clock kind of way. It may not always
yeah,
be for the reasons that she should be suspicious of them. Like she, doesn't seem to like Laris and doesn't really have any um, uh, a good reason for that, it turns out. But um, I don't know. It's just I wish we had gotten to see her vindicated about this,
yeah,
in some way.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
glad that we can at least present that in our analysis of
yeah.
her.
And you see here that Laris is one of those people that she's, I think, at heart a good person, but she's going to do what she sees as her duty. And if
Hmm.
she's told to work these girls hard and put them at the worst tasks, she's going to do that. But when she thinks it's been enough, she has enough strength of will to speak up to the Aes Sedai and tell them. But she's not going to sneak around behind their backs and tell the girls that, or even give a hint that she's going to take it easy on them. She's going to
Hmm.
actually take it up through the chain of command, which may not be very nice, but it is probably the proper way to do it. So yeah, she's just guilty of being good at her job and answering to the people who signs her paychecks,
Yeah.
and not in a way that is in any way evil or bad. In fact, if we recall, she is one who it really helps Siwan Sanche later, when Siwan is still
Yeah.
helps her escape and has a soft spot for people, but she doesn't let it show very often because it's her job to work these girls hard, to develop character through hard work. And I said, I believe these girls need a lot of character because they definitely give them a lot of hard work. Um, all right, a couple more things here. Swan hits Nynaeve with this bombshell information that Else Grinwell has been gone for 10 days. So that was not Else you were talking to. I'm trying to recall. I think the Aes Sedai did know about the Mask of Mirrors because we know Moiraine used something similar in Barillon when they were leaving, and she created an image of herself gigantically tall and stepped over the walls of Barillon. We also see other Aes Sedai doing something similar when they meet with Rand later in Kyrian. They kind of subtly made themselves look bigger, so he would have to look up at their images, not just
Hmm.
hugely gigantic, but taller than they really were. So I don't know. I don't think it's a complete mask of mirrors where you make yourself look like someone different. There's so much of they have the information to distort an image and change it somewhat. But what they don't have at this time is the ability to tie off a weave and invert it so the other sisters can't
Mhm.
see it, see that you're doing it.
Right.
So the it really bothered me that this did not shock Siwan more than that. In my mind, her mind should have gone instantly to one of the Forsaken because I believe, oh gosh, it's so hard to get your timeline straight with this massive story. But I believe she knows at this point that some of the Forsaken are out in the world. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I know the last time she talked to Moiraine, Moiraine kind of kept that back.
Oh yeah, in Faldara, definitely.
Yeah, and so, and I don't think they've corresponded since then. And the news comes to the White Tower really late, as we see it, like in the beginning of the Shadow Rising, right before Swan is deposed. We're seeing a lot of stuff that they're just learning about from previous books. Like,
Okay.
they're catching up with like the stuff from Falma and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. So, I don't know that she has any way of knowing that right now.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes a little more sense then. That
She's got enough clues that that's something she should be looking out for, though. I mean, she's the one who brought it up when she and Moiraine were talking in Faldara. Like,
yes.
oh, I assume next you're going to tell me the Forsaken are loose or something. so, um, I
And
mean,
then
she,
Moraine's like, "No, I'm not gonna tell you that."
yeah.
Typical Aes Sedai answer. Let me ask you, this is a little off topic, but we do that here. How often do you find yourself giving an Aes Sedai type answer, people, where you
I
don't
don't.
lie
I'm
to
not
them?
smart
Oh,
enough
really?
to do that. I'm not a good liar like that. I can't like
Yeah.
cleverly state a half truth like that
Okay.
on my feet. No.
Yeah.
It's something
Oh,
I always think of later, kind of like a
yeah.
retort,
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it
What
just
about
has to
you?
do with age. I find myself doing it more and more
Mm.
over the years. But yeah, something at work happened, and a customer said, "Well, I heard so and so, so and so," and I said, "Well, that's not what's supposed to happen." And and
Yeah.
they took it and ran with it. I told my boss about it later. That's what I told him, and he started laughing. He said, "Well, you're right. That's not supposed to happen, but that is exactly what happened." Yes, sir. I knew that, but the customer was happy when I told him what I did. So, oh, I'm sorry to get off topic like that, but I do find myself doing that sometimes. So, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe Swan chalked that up. I'm sure she has a lot of plots and subplots going on, and just because of her training in the White Tower, she did not show much reaction to this. But
Hmm.
I
And I
don't.
don't know that it would change what she's going to do. She's still
Right.
sending these girls into danger because they're like supposedly the only people she can trust to do it.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
um, I,
I'm I'm
yeah,
still very surprised she couldn't find one sister she trusted to send with them.
right?
That would have, I don't know, but I guess you
Hmm.
can't. If you can't, you can't. Um, so anyway, the Amerlin and Nynaeve, they mutter back and forth a lot under their breath, and they pass a surprising large amount of information through this muttering. So this conversation goes on a while. I find myself, reading this part, and I'm thinking, I think people would grow suspicious if you're standing there muttering that much for this
I mean,
long. But
in this series in general, the amount of times that people supposedly mutter something that other people around them can't hear is just
yes,
totally implausible to me. I'm like, I have
yeah,
to imagine it as like anime or something like really
yes,
unrealistic to make it kind of just I don't know, so that I can just buy it.
yeah.
So it's one of the ways that the tone of these books is not quite as serious and straightforward. It's a little more comedic
In
sometimes, you know what I
in
mean? It's
some
kind of
point,
hard to
yeah,
take it fully just like straight seriously.
yeah, yeah. At some points, that's true. But then, yeah, so this goes on for a while, and then she asks the Amerlin, "What is Kalendor?" And of course, at that point, the Amerlin breaks this Aes Sedai calm, and she almost turns and, with just this incredulous look on her face, and yeah, and then of course says back to Nynaeve, quote, "If you die keeping that out of the Black Ajah's hands, you and Egwene and Elaine, all three, you'll have done a service to the whole world and at a cheap price." End quote.
Mm.
Um, uh, I'd have a hard time somebody telling me that my life would be a cheap price.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, though in the grand scheme of things, yeah, that would be a cheap price to save the world from that disaster or potential disaster. You don't tell somebody that. You don't tell the soldier going into battle, yeah, okay, yeah, your life's cheap. We may put you on the front lines, but we're going to make you think we've got your back no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is what she's doing. She's putting these girls out on the front lines, literally, in this battle against the dark, and just basically telling them you're disposable at this point. If you can save Kalendor from falling into their hands, yeah, it was worth your death. So, yeah, that's not the kind of thing you tell somebody right before you send them out. But um,
No, and it I think it's supposed to be a mark of how much she's lost her composure about being asked about
yes,
Kalendor.
I
And it's
agree.
also interesting that Nynaeve doesn't dwell on that statement by the Armelin either. She doesn't even think about it, and I think it's because she's not surprised. She already expects that the Armelin is using them in that way, and
Mhm.
expects that that's what Aes Sedai do, you know. So
Right.
she's not particularly perturbed by that admission because she already knew that.
Yes, yes. And then it got me to thinking about the service that Nynaeve would do to the world. And the two
Hmm.
great ones that came to mind was, first of all, when she uses the female key to the Chodan Kal to cleanse the taint. She and Rand working together the way Aes Sedai are supposed to. Um, and so many people in the book, at least, they don't make a very big deal of that. Most of the
Yeah.
fans I talk to are blown away by what a huge deal that is.
Yeah.
And I think it's written that way intentionally, where a lot of the players are in their characters, they're not really sure you know, how big that is. But all of us, the readers, we understand, hey, this is getting the world back to the way it's supposed to be. This is overcoming 3,000 years of wrongness. So, this is a great thing, not just a good thing, it's a great thing. So I believe that we all will know that Nynaeve's name will go down in history for that great act. And then using the very thing she questions, your Kalendor, to help capture Moradin due to the flaw in Kalendor, and sealing away the Dark One and controlling Moradin and keeping him from hurting and killing Rand. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, those are two very big services she does for the whole world. And thank you,
Absolutely.
Nynaeve. Thank you. Um, so anyway, that's
Yes.
all the points I have about this. But this is a fun and interesting chapter because you have a lot of information packed into a small space, and you have both that tension from the big events that we see unfolding, and this is one of those where even the reader gets the sense, the feeling that they feel the jaws of the trap closing on these girls. We know it's going to happen. It's not even a question, and they know
Yeah.
it. So it's not just something where they say the character feels it. We feel it. Um, but at the same time, you have this humor that's laced throughout it. Even the minor things like when the Amerlin is glaring at everyone, Laris even tries to look busy, and she takes the wooden spoon that she only ever uses to hit people with and point around and wave it around like a scepter. She starts stirring soup. Can't even say that. Stirring soup with it, and then forgets about it later and is tapping it on her apron, just splattering soup
Yeah.
all over her apron. And it's such a tiny little thing, but we have those little moments of humor added in here that really strengthen this whole story. And Nynaeve does not have a lot of points of view early on in this series, more than Matrim Cawthon to this point, but she doesn't have many. But the ones she have, they tend to be very significant, and this is one of those. You see the portents of big events in the future, and yet you still have these little lighthearted moments that keep it very real and funny.
Yeah, I think too, something we noticed that's a little unique to this point of view chapter is, well, we see a couple of things reinforced that we already know happens in Nynaeve's perspective. The fact that she tends to be pretty judgmental of other people, we know even before being in her head. But it's interesting to see how she's a harsh critic of herself too, as we've talked about in previous episodes already. We see that reinforced here. She kind of cursed only in her head, and she has such a strong sense of propriety about swearing that she seems to think of that as the same as actually swearing.
Ah,
In the
yes,
first
yes.
paragraph, she's like, it describes how that was a sign of just how exasperated she was with this work that she would use language like that, and she didn't even say it. Um, and she's judgmental of other people. We know that she is of Laris in this chapter, but she gets nasty with it, and she does that with other women sometimes in the way she thinks about them. She calls her a cow. She's thinking about her
Mm,
physique in a derogatory way.
wow.
But when she learned that Laris tried to protect them from being overworked, as we already talked about, she did her best to suck it up and show her smiles, even if she wasn't enjoying what she was doing. But of course, in true Nynaeve fashion, she wasn't thinking of herself as being cowed while she was doing that, even though it
Oh,
might look like that's what's happening from the outside.
yeah,
There's a totally other reason for it on the inside. Don't worry about
yeah.
it. So in addition to these things we've seen before, there is something a little new here. We tend to think of Nynaeve as not being very subtle, but here she quickly grasped before Elaine or Egwene did what Swan was doing when she made that false accusation to get Elaine out of the room, and then kind of Egwene ended up having to tag along. Um, Nynaeve was ready to go along with it, or at least she was eager to tell the other women to go along with it. Like she was sort of gesticulating at them, like, "Wait, no, 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 don't, Egwene, shut your mouth, Elaine, just go along with it." But I doubt that she would have grasped it so quickly, or seemed to, and been as compliant as she expects them to be if she were the one who had been called out. If she was the
Oh,
one who was going to have her mouth washed out with. So she wouldn't just apprehend it and go along with the plan, right? So maybe the other
right,
girls did understand what was going on, but they weren't, they were too stubborn to go along with it. But either
right.
way, it's just kind of funny how Nynaeve could see from the outside what was going on, and we don't normally think of her as a person who's really picks up on really subtle cues or whatever,
Yeah,
but she
yeah.
did here, so that was kind of interesting.
Oh, you're right. Had the Almerlin singled her out, she would have squawked the whole way out the door, and when she and Laris would have come in, Nynaeve would still be spitting soap bubbles, and Laris would have a black eye. I mean, it's just
Yep,
no
that
other way
sounds
that
about
would have
right.
happened. Oh, but yeah, as far as her judgmentalism, I didn't even think of that, but you're right. And we do see this many times throughout the series, but I hadn't focused on it on this chapter. She is very judgmental of people. It's like something I read recently. I hate judgmental people. I know them when I see them.
Yeah.
She
That could be a Nynaeve quote
that
even.
yeah, it should be a Nynaeve Almira quote. So yeah, she definitely picks out people who are like that. Yet she is that way so strongly. Um, yeah, that's a fun chapter. Well, if you don't have anything else, I'll lead us on into chapter 51.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
entitled Bait for the Net. And of course, this takes us a very large jump through the story. But just to catch everyone up, the girls have gone to Tyr and they are searching, they're on the hunt for the Black Aja. There lives a woman they call Mother Gwenna, who's another something similar to a wisdom. So the chapter begins that Nynaeve is walking through the mud of the marketplace in the Mall of Tyr, and she spots someone in the crowd who looks a lot like Rand. Then this fishmonger trips, and all of his fish land standing face up in the mud in a perfect circle. But nah, Rand couldn't be here. It's impossible. And anyway, the man was swept away by the crowd before she could get a second glimpse. So she goes and buys some meat at outrageous prices at a marketplace. She grumbles outwardly, seemingly upset that the shopkeeper was not getting upset with her. It seemed like all the people of Tyr were just giving up after 1 year of difficult harvest. Nothing like the folk of the two rivers. Then, stalking back to Mother Gwenna's house, she almost runs into Julian Sandar, who informs her that he's found their quarry. These thieves, quote unquote, were living in the stone of Tyr itself. If she would just hurry back to Mother Gwenna's house, he would explain everything to all three of them at once. So, going back to the house and in the back door, Nynaeve spots Mother Gwenna sitting rigidly in her chair. Too rigidly. Nynaeve realizes the Black Aja must have the woman wrapped in air, and instantly her anger is roused, and she reaches for the one power and finds that she's shielded. Leandrin and Rihanna both step out of a back room, gloating at how Nynaeve was so helpless now. Denied the power, Nynaeve splits her lip with a good right hook, then backhanded Rihanna in the same move and ran for the door. But the two begin beating her with weaves of air so cripplingly until she lies crumpled on the floor, unable to move more than just a twitch. Leandrin spares Mother Gwenna's life. Then they take Nynaeve to the front room, where two other Black sisters are keeping Elaine and Egwene. Elaine's face is a mass of bruises, her dress is torn, and Egwene has been beaten until she has passed out. Nynaeve curses them for hurting Egwene, but they threaten to remove her tongue if she can't keep it civil. Still, she does take a moment to threaten Julian Sandar for his treachery, but Leandrin assures her that he had no choice but to be obedient. The people of the mall avoided looking at the High Lord Samon's carriage as the three girls were put in it, and once inside, Nynaeve and Elaine try to warn each other not to say too much about the quote trap that's been set and how they must be taken inside the stone. Hush before you say too much. But the Black Aja sisters smile and seem to know that it's all just a ruse. Then they inform the girls that the master they serve is none other than Balal, the Forsaken, and he has already called for 13 Murdrall to join him and his 13 Black Aja channelers to be sure that these three girls learn to obey. Their screams drown out all thought and end the chapter for us.
Despite all the harrowing plot of this chapter, there's a lot of small details in Nynaeve's point of view that don't really have a ton to do with the overall plot that
Right.
I wanted to pull out. The first one being that Nynaeve seems to have a really hard time with economics. She does not seem to understand supply and demand. Things are going to cost different amounts in different places. It kind of makes sense that she would struggle with this concept because she um, came of age in a village with mostly bartering and some communal ways of living. Coins are used rarely and mostly just with outlanders. And so she keeps this frame of reference and just refuses to accept that things might cost more in different areas due to different access to different resources or temporary circumstances like war. Um, Elaine has to explain this stuff to her, and she's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I get the reasons kind of, but this is still too expensive. Um,
Yes.
she just keeps that Two Rivers frame of reference always in her mind. So it's just one of those ways that she's rigid. Um, and she claims to be about clothing, but that's one of the things that where she's always saying one thing and doing another. A totally different topic that doesn't really show up in this chapter, but I think,
Hypocrite.
yeah, exactly. I think with the money, that's one where she's consistent with herself about that one at least.
Yes, yes. And and part of what she's seeing there is not just the cost of things, but she starts getting angry with the shopkeeper and she expects him to get angry back at her
Yeah.
and argue back and forth so they can kind of start dickering on the price somewhat. But
Mm-hmm.
he says nothing. And she notices other people in the marketplace. One woman is holding up some fruit that Nynaeve doesn't recognize, and she's yelling about, see what kind of garbage this man's trying to sell. And that shopkeeper's just standing there taking it. He's not arguing back or trying to, just convince people
Yeah.
she's nothing but a troublemaker. And part of that has to do with the fact that the Forsaken is there.
Oh yeah.
We see that in all of the cities where Forsaken takes over, people start having
Mm-hmm.
these bad dreams and there's bitterness. But in this case, there's hopelessness. People just have this sort of a general blanket depression of, well, why bother? And I think that bothers Nynaeve as much as the prices.
Oh yeah.
And but she doesn't know why. They don't understand the source of it. Now, of course, in a bit she finds out that Balal is there, but it's still not been tied to the overall mental health of the city the way it kind of I guess is explained to us later, and as we see this pattern emerge from different
Mm-hmm.
cities, from different Forsaken. But yeah, in this case, she's just like, well, why don't these people, just start doing more here? In the Two Rivers, we've had two bad harvests in a row where, basically all you had was wild onion soup and some old barley, and that, we survived the winter on that. And these people have been losing that grit and that determination, but it's again because of that outside influence. In a normal bad year where they couldn't sell their grain and The economy is somewhat depressed. They do still have the fishing industry. They do still have some shipping and trade industry. And the city would survive and go on. It would just create hardship in certain places for certain people. But in this case, that hardship, has kind of it really becomes secondary to that overall general miasma of depression that is caused by the Forsaken. And I still don't know if that's something the Forsaken intentionally do, just so people are not suspicious of this newcomer, or if that's just a byproduct of that much evil. It's never really explained. It's sort of a soft magic concept in a
It
way.
is. It
But
is. And it's one that we see more early in the series when much of the magic is less articulated for us in how it
yeah,
works. So
right,
I'm not sure if it's something that was intentionally vague or if that sort of just suffers from some of the vagueness that happens early in the series before things were firmed up a little more in the more on the hard magic side
right.
as the story progressed. I don't know about that one, but I'd be curious if anybody knows from
Yeah.
words of RJ interview or anything else, any theories out there. I'd be curious.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, I would
I
too.
like that Nynaeve is at least able to talk herself into being patient with these people. She doesn't really understand why the locals are so listless and so depressed as you're talking about, but she does finally sort of internally talk herself around to, well, I guess I should be patient with them. And with Julian, Sandar, and Mother Gwenna, who are also really getting on her nerves, but she still can't bring herself to be patient with Egwene. And this is part of the story where they are really having it out, and I think it's a lot of it's just Egwene really growing in her power, her use of the one power, but also just getting more autonomy than she's ever really
Yeah.
had. And so she is really testing the boundaries with Nynaeve
Yeah.
a lot. And I don't even remember, somebody ends up slapping somebody around this point in the story. I don't even exactly
Oh,
remember what happened, but they were all really getting on each other's nerves and really
yeah.
getting on my nerves as the reader too. I think it was intentional. I think
Yes.
RJ made them all very annoying to be around so that we could feel the same just I don't know, like the heat and like the lassitude of just and the mud of what it's like to be there
Right.
in Tyr right now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was feeling it.
Yeah. You'd want to feel that mugginess and the oppression and all of it,
Hmm.
as well as being in a strange place. Um,
Yeah.
y- you know, Early on in the story, like everyone acknowledged that Rand's mother, was not from the Two Rivers. They never said where she was from. Now I think the story
Hmm.
does, but the people there of the Two Rivers of Emmons Field never said, "Oh, well, she was Ileana," or "Oh,
Hmm.
she was Tyrian," or whatever, Kyrian, whatever. Uh, she was an outlander. You were either in the Two Rivers or you were an outlander, and it didn't
Yeah.
matter what country that was. No one
Yeah.
really was curious about it. And and you see Nynaeve carries forward a little of that bias with her,
Hmm.
and you know, in the people of the city. It's like you said, she's willing to kind of excuse them because, well, they're outlanders. They don't know any better,
Yeah. In the same way that Aiel sometimes are, like they don't hold
Yes,
wetlanders to Giotto.
yes, exactly. That would be crazy because wetlanders aren't strong enough to understand and follow Giotto. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that was a great example. I like that one. And as well, the way they're getting on each other's nerves. Again, I think part of that is Bilal's influence on them.
Yeah.
Part of it may be this psychic connection where she knows Matt is getting close by. We don't know. That's
Mm.
always a possibility because those two, they're definitely water and oil. They don't need to be in the same room together. They do not mix well. They don't play well with others. Um, and And as you said, part of it is Egwene kind of learning her own agency, learning her own independence and her own strengths. Um, that's something I don't mean to get personal with this, but that's something I've seen with teenagers. When you're raising a
Mhm.
teenager, they,
Yeah. Yeah, I
they
think we have enough distance from this that
not,
you can
yeah,
speak frankly.
yes, nothing specific, but but teenagers do have this tendency to be somewhat rebellious
Yeah.
and want to question everything you say. Even though if you're telling them something that they know is the right thing to do, they want to question it because that's uh, really a subconscious effort on their part to be their own person, to be an
Yeah,
autonomous
it's
individual.
annoying, but it is developmentally appropriate.
Yes,
It's
yes,
like they're just learning uh, who holds power around them. They're learning things about social life, and
right.
so they're part of learning about that is by testing it and questioning it. In the same way that toddlers are doing developmentally appropriate,
Oh,
but also
yes,
very annoying things when they throw stuff around, like they're
right,
exploring, oh, how do these physical objects like work? What is this texture like? I don't know, let me throw it at the wall, you know?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's teenagers kind of verbally and socially do that.
Yes. Oh, that's a very good way of viewing it because it's true. Yeah, it's finding out about the world around them, and sometimes through making mistakes. Yeah, that's well, in fact, probably the only way we really learn a whole lot is through making mistakes. But
Yeah.
but yeah, we see it because we did not see Egwene go through that much in the Two Rivers. She was a good, dutiful daughter. Was looking forward to her life there, and then she goes off with Moraine, and she's compliant. She does what she's told. She is a valid part of the group, but she's not really standing on her own. And then after all the
Yeah.
trauma of being under Seanchan captivity and coming back to the White Tower and not really having a chance to heal from that. And I think part of her is just screaming out to be my own person. I want
Yeah.
to be who I am. I don't want to be just the dutiful daughter. I don't want to be someone's wife. I want to know who I am before I become Aes Sedai, and in her case, even Amerlin. And she could never be good at those roles until she discovered who she was inside. And through all the trauma and things, she's experimentally doing that. She's no longer Nynaeve's apprentice, and she's not gonna talk like she's Nynaeve's apprentice, and it's not something where she's coming out just trying to be defiant or being a jerk. She's just kinda pointing out that through her actions and discovering it for herself. "Yeah, I'm not your apprentice anymore, so we're not gonna pretend like I am wisdom."
Right.
So,
Um, and
yeah.
Nynaeve should, it seems like she would understand this, but I think she's under a lot of pressures too. And it's not that surprising due to probably Belal's influence, like you said, that she's not able to really summon that patience with Egwene. She's just too close to this situation.
Yeah,
They're too close.
yeah.
um,
Oh, exactly.
but
Yeah.
she is able to really have a lot of patience for other people, though. I find it compassionate of her that she doesn't. She seems to understand, and she doesn't begrudge Mother Gwenna for agreeing with the Black Ajah to keep quiet about this
Right, right.
under threats. Nynaeve sympathizes with her. She knows that it wouldn't do her any good at all to speak up for them, and she doesn't think of that as her betraying them or doing the wrong thing. Interestingly, she doesn't seem to automatically extend that sympathy to Julian right away. It takes some convincing later, I think,
Yes.
from Matt, even though she saw Leandrin say that he was under compulsion. I don't think she really understood what compulsion was at this stage or
No.
something. She's like, Light, what did they do to him in her mind? But moves on from that pretty quickly. Um, so yeah, it's just she's a little tougher on men sometimes, I think, and this is one of
Yeah.
those examples.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. She can be, and that is a kind of a painful example of that. Well, another thing here where she is a little short on patience is when she walks into the house and she's shielded. And I have to tell you, I love this moment. This is one that at some point in the series, I believe in some form, it may be changed, but I believe it will be on screen on the show when Leandrin has her shielded and she's gloating. "Oh, look, I told you you'd be totally helpless." And she can't even get the word helpless out until there's a fist rammed down her throat. And I love
Hmm.
that. And I love the way Nynaeve does it too. She punches her and knocks her in the floor and then just kind of in the same motion backhands the other one, Rihanna, right in the face and then tries to make a break for it. It's almost like a a sword fighter's move. I don't know if it's something her watching Lan practice all those times or what, but the way she punches one and then swings back with a backhand to the other, she doesn't give them time to think or react. And and that is so classic Nynaeve that she's not going to be helpless or until there are no options whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just because the one power wasn't there, most any Aes Sedai would, you know, they wouldn't think to punch somebody. But yeah, Nynaeve, no, you take away the one power, well then she's going with the fist. You take away the fist, she's going to bite. She's going to do something until it's just impossible for her to do anything, which is what she did here. So I was proud of her for that. I
Oh yeah.
I hurt for her in empathy with the beating she took, but then I'm proud again when they walk into the next room and Elaine can barely talk. Her face is all swollen up and her sleeves torn. And Egwene is, of course, it breaks your heart to see her just in a heap,
Yeah.
passed out, unconscious on the floor, covered in bruises and welts. But the two of them fought. They fought like
Hmm.
cornered cats. I mean, they gave it everything they had. So, Nynaeve is not the only one who has some fire in her, and I like that. Of course, with Egwene, I see it as further trauma because she has
Yeah.
been collared before, and that was very traumatic, and just the thoughts of being captured is almost unbearable to her.
Hmm.
Because she was having PTSD flashbacks of the collar in a sense,
Yep.
but I think it was just not the fact that they were there, but the helplessness she felt in that situation. But to see that they didn't give up, even when things were that hopeless and helpless, none of these three women gave up. And I love that about them. I really, truly respect these characters, their strength, and even against totally unbeatable odds, they're going to fight with everything they have, because that's what you should do when you're faced with complete evil. Is you don't give up and you don't give in to evil. You don't, you can't, and they did not. So yeah, I like that about them.
Yeah, they're absolutely stubborn and tenacious, and we get to see that here in this chapter, kind of as the epitome of that.
Yeah, yeah. And then having the presence of thought in the carriage for Nynaeve to say something about, uh, the, you know, we've got all these sisters. You think they would send us out here by
Yeah,
ourselves?
she was
And
clever, thinking
yeah,
on her
you
feet.
are, you've sprung the trap now. And then Elaine chimes in with, "Don't say too much. They have to take us inside the stone first." And and not both of them know what the other one's doing, but it's pretty apparent that Leandra knows what they're doing as well. So
Yeah,
uh,
true.
that does.
They tried though.
Oh yeah, they gave it their best. I don't know if it's you could see the lie on their faces, or even if maybe she did believe them, but just knew that the Forsaken could handle it, and
Yeah.
yeah, we'll just inform him and he'll deal with it. I don't know, but it just, you know, again, that thing that they kept fighting, that was the only way they had to fight back. So they kept using it. And I really respect them for that.
Yeah, and yeah, those were pretty much the end of my notes.
Okay. Yep. So that's all I had on this one. Well, I hope everyone will join us next time for season 3, episode 5, when we're going to cover The Shadow Rising, chapters 39 and 52.
Wheel of Mind is written by Lajara and Giskel and produced by Lajara. Our original theme music was composed by Wendigo. You can find his new Lairs EP on SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube, and I'll link those in the description. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Mind, but this is an ending. To catch a beginning next time an episode drops, subscribe to us on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, or Spotify. You can also find our episodes on YouTube under the channel name Lajara Dane. That's Lajaradayne. To leave feedback, rate, and review on whichever platform you use to listen to us, or contact us at lajaradane@gmail.com or at mind_wheel on Twitter. To support the show, subscribe to us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/wheel of mind.